Yo, how's it going, everybody? It's the Masked Man, and if you remember a few months ago, I did a video saying Chainsaw Man is up next. And as the news had been released that Chainsaw Man was ending, it started to gain a lot of traction and people were surprised because it seemed like the story was just starting to get popular. And then soon right after, we're hit with the news that Chainsaw Man is not only getting a part 2 continuation, but it's also getting an anime adaptation. Now, for some time now, I've been in communication with another YouTuber who's talked a good bit about Chainsaw Man over on his channel, and we've been planning out a big video for when Chainsaw Man was ending, but we decided this would be the perfect opportunity to not only talk about what Chainsaw Man has done and solidified itself as, but what the possible future of Chainsaw Man could be and its legacy. So essentially this video is going to be split up into 3 parts. The first part where we talk about the nature, if you will, of Chainsaw Man's anime adaptation and the possibilities of it blowing up and being successful, but also the huge fear and possibility of it being a horrendous adaptation. Next, we're going to discuss the manga part 2 and what that could possibly mean for the series as well. And in the third part of the video, we're going to be talking about the overall impact Chainsaw Man could have on the shonen manga culture. As someone put in the comments, there seems to be this beautiful dark trio within manga at the current moment. Chainsaw Man, the up-and-coming star, Jujutsu Kaisen, the anime and manga that burst into the mainstream, and the super underrated work Hell's Paradise. But of course in this video we're mostly going to be focusing on Chainsaw Man. But before we get into any of that, first I want to introduce my guest, so go ahead and say hello.
Now I actually can't remember the last time I've done an intro, so this is going to sound very unnatural, but hello, I would be Sufferents, formerly known as Dressrosa, and I'm more than thankful and humble to be on here talking about Chainsaw Man with Mask. I'll also apologize in advance for any inconsistencies within this audio. That would be a fault on my behalf. Hopefully next time we can do this live so it's a little bit more free-flowing and consistent, but nonetheless, thank you.
Now when it comes to the Chainsaw anime, I will say I do believe it is a huge hit or miss nature. And let me explain why. Now, everything I say here at the beginning is mostly going to be applying to part 1, but later on I'll discuss the possibilities and the issues that might happen with part 2. Now, when it comes to the part 1 portion of Chainsaw Man, what has just been finished, I think the major concern is CGI. I understand that Studio Mappa currently has been doing a fantastic job with Attack on Titan, and also Jujutsu Kaisen if I'm not mistaken, but when it comes to Chainsaw Man, I don't know what it is, but I could painfully see it be done dirty with horrible CGI. And since the studio seems to already be busy with JJK and Attack on Titan, it would be possible to see Chainsaw Man getting the short end of the stick here. Now, I know there's a good amount of people that have no issue with CGI whatsoever within their anime, and I also know there's a good amount of people that think that there are certain CGI animes that are good. For instance, I heard the Dorohedoro anime is a fantastic adaptation, but I personally despise CGI. For me, it just looks all janky, clunky, and it does not look pretty whatsoever. Especially if there are also moments with 2D animation, the 3D animation and CGI just sticks out like a sore thumb, and as a Berserk fan, I get PTSD just even thinking about it. But I don't know what it is, but I can vividly imagine a CGI-filled Chainsaw Man anime, but for some reason I could hardly imagine a 2D animation one. Now, even though that is a huge con in my eyes, I also do think there's still a pro because nonetheless, the news of it getting an anime and maybe people hating the anime adaptation would bring people to read the manga, which is what usually ends up happening anyways. And so even then, the worst con of Chainsaw Man's anime just being a bad adaptation, whether that's due not only to CGI but just changing things within the story, and this is a real quick one I'll get into the part 2, as Tokyo Ghoul and Tokyo Ghoul Re and other mangas also seem to have this issue where they're still wrapping up a specific portion of their story, the anime catches up, and so the anime ends up having to create its own anime original ending that no one likes. But now I'll leave it to Sufferents to talk about the pros and all of the fantastic things that could come along with a good anime adaptation for Chainsaw Man.
I think one of, if not the biggest positive that a Chainsaw Man anime could provide is easily the rise to fame, success, and popularity. If you're lucky enough to get a bunch of talented individuals to work on something that they wholeheartedly appreciate themselves and want to bring it to life, to see it do extremely well, having a collective of creative people birth something extremely enjoyable for a series that you were personally connected to is one of the greatest things that you can experience. And if these talented individuals are bringing Chainsaw Man to life and crafting it with passion, you should be able to expect those positive results: fame, success, popularity. Even if Fujimoto, the author of the series, doesn't really care about the success or how popular Chainsaw Man becomes, seeing it with your own eyes, being there from the beginning is such an unreal feeling. Watching something that you love and adore grow in popularity and reach a whole new set of eyes and a whole new set of people. Personally, it's something that I feel Chainsaw Man deserves. And with the recent trend that Demon Slayer has created and Jujutsu Kaisen projected to somewhat follow in its footsteps, seeing a very massive rise in audience and readers in an extremely short amount of time is something that has a lot of hefty impact. The chances of Chainsaw Man doing the exact same thing is well and truly high, and would be absolutely amazing to see the overall reception for it and people experiencing Chainsaw Man for the very first time, whether it be within its manga format or its anime. At this point, only time will tell.
Now, I think this portion of the video might be a little bit smaller due to its difficult nature. It's really hard to predict what the next entire part of the story is going to be, as we've reached the entire closure of the recent thing. A lot of the important characters have been killed off, the antagonist has been dealt with, and now Denji seems to be a new man. I'd say outside of Power and Denji, and actually even including them, I think what I'm most interested in seeing is actually the antagonistic forces within Part 2. As I've always expressed in many other videos, the antagonistic force and what it's capable of doing is usually pretty indicative of the narrative strength within your actual story. Although not always, it definitely does help to have a good antagonist. And seeing how much a lot of people loved Part 1 of Chainsaw Man and what it was capable of doing, I am really intrigued to see what they're able to do in Part 2 to bring it up a level. Because if Part 2 of Chainsaw Man is around equal to Part 1, I don't think anybody's going to have any issues. Now, if in Part 2 they end up making a lot of horrible narrative decisions, or just do things that really do not sit well with the fan base whatsoever, it's going to be a tragic thing to see. Two of the biggest examples I'll throw out there is Naruto Shippuden and Tokyo Ghoul Re. Tokyo Ghoul Re and Naruto Shippuden were both continuations of Part 1s that most people prefer than the continuation. Naruto Part 1 having a lot of fantastic moments and an overall consistent level of quality, and the same can be said for Tokyo Ghoul. Now, as for Naruto Shippuden and Tokyo Ghoul Re, I think we can all agree that those are series that had a lot of peaks but also a lot of bigger falls, and I could see the same thing happening with a Part 2 in Chainsaw Man. I could see it having a lot of phenomenal moments that the fan base does really enjoy. However, it's also possible to see it have a lot of drop-offs and downfalls as it tries to create a new force for Denji to contend with. But as for what Denji could become as a character and some of the other things that could potentially happen with Chainsaw Man Part 2, I'll leave that to my boy.
One thing that I absolutely love about Fujimoto and how he handles his stories is how completely unpredictable he truly is. So as much as we could sit here and theory craft about what Part 2 could actually entail, in reality it's most likely going to be completely different, and the curveballs that he will implement are going to be completely out of our vision. The only things that I feel confident in saying that he most likely will play upon is the primordial fears and the four horsemen of the apocalypse, as well as Makima a little bit, or at least the control level, I should say specifically. These things have had a lot of emphasis surrounding them, how they influence the world, how they influence the characters, and overall the ripple effect they provide. They are directly linked to Denji as a character, and if there ever was a better opportunity to have Denji fight some of the most crazy things that you could imagine and upping that level once more from Part 1, the remaining primordial fears and the four horsemen of the apocalypse is 100% the best way to go about it. Technically, we've only seen one, the Darkness Devil, but the impact and overall pressure that the Darkness Devil provided was absolutely insane. So you can imagine just how wild the other primordial fears could be, and even more so for the four horsemen of the apocalypse. Not to mention the continuation of the Control Devil from a different mindset, from a different perspective. Something Denji himself has to basically watch over and somewhat even raise. Not to mention on top of all of that, the exploration and connection to power, the growth and development for Denji as a character, mentally, physically, emotionally, with Part 2 being shifted to Shonen Jump Plus that covers a larger age demographic, Fujimoto can spread his wings more freely. So I would 100% expect a dive into more mature themes and the exploration in detail for them. I'm more than excited to see what route he truly takes and what he wants to show off.
Now we reach the final segment of the video where we talk about the overall legacy of Chainsaw Man and the current landscape of what it's capable of doing. Chainsaw Man isn't something entirely new, as there have been shonens before within Shonen Jump that we looked at and we were like, how the heck is this within a shonen magazine? It looks like a seinen, but it's in a shonen. But again, with the presence of Jujutsu Kaisen and Hell's Paradise, it does seem like there is a dark tone and shift that things might be heading towards. I think a lot of people can recall the 90s, where when it came to comic book characters, being dark and edgy was kind of the thing. And that's nothing completely new, as for instance in the comic book industry, there are certain eras where dark stories seem to be a lot more sellable to the audiences due to the overall cultural nature of how things are going within the world. Again, just look at the 90s and it producing Spawn. But back to Chainsaw Man, I do believe that if it's given a good anime adaptation, or at least a good enough to where it can explode into the mainstream like Jujutsu Kaisen did, it's going to be very interesting to see how Chainsaw Man solidifies itself even more as a cult classic, and I think it's going to be pretty interesting to see the debate start to spark up even more. Chainsaw Man versus Jujutsu Kaisen, and just seeing all of that get more toxic is going to be painful. Seeing how a certain portion of the JJK fanbase just starts to wild out, and I know that's just one of those things where the more people there are, the more likely for toxic and very stupid people. But I don't want to see it happen with Chainsaw Man 2. Please, no more. But if all goes well, I do think Chainsaw Man has already started to solidify itself and will further solidify itself as one of the defining mangas and animes of this era.
Undoubtedly, Chainsaw Man may seem overly chaotic and all over the place, but regardless, an enthralling experience. But underneath lies so much beautiful attention to detail, stuff that you don't necessarily pay attention to if you're just casually reading through, something that Part 2 can finally explore more efficiently. As much as I'm happy to see it potentially get the success it deserves and its boom into popularity and mainstream thanks to its anime, the volatile interaction that it will unfortunately produce is well and truly a thing. But here's hoping we can all coexist and potentially see Chainsaw Man bloom into popularity and stardom.
So hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you are new to the channel, make sure you like, comment, subscribe, and turn on the bell notifications. That way notify whenever a new video pops up on some of your favorite anime, manga, or whatever content. And I will also be leaving the link to Sufferents' channel down in the description below, of course. As always, this has been The Masked Man. Hope everyone has a blessed rest of the day, and peace.